The years that followed were long and agonizing, a slow unraveling of everything I had once held dear. My life, once built on love and trust, crumbled the night Ethan found me in Michael's arms. 5 years had passed since I had last seen my ex-husband, the man I had once believed to be my soulmate. But in that moment, none of the time apart, none of the distance, could justify what he witnessed. The betrayal in his eyes was devastating, an agony so raw that it shattered not only his heart, but the life we had carefully woven together over a decade. I could still see him standing there, frozen in the doorway, the takeout bag slipping slightly in his grasp as his fingers trembled. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He didn't demand answers. His silence was more damning than any outburst could have been. His eyes, once filled with warmth and devotion, dulled as he looked at me like I was a stranger. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, vanishing from my life as if I had never been a part of his. Ethan left town that night, leaving me alone to bear the weight of my choices and the judgment of those who had once been our friends. I had no right to fight for him, for our home, or for the memories we had made. When I signed the divorce papers, my hands shook, my tears smudging the ink, but I knew I deserved to lose him. The years that followed were marked by painful introspection. Therapy became my refuge, the one place where I could dissect the fractures in my marriage and confront the emptiness inside me that had driven me to seek comfort in someone else. It wasn't just the infidelity that haunted me. It was the loneliness I had carried within me for years, the constant fear that I was never enough, the desperate craving for validation that I had sought in Michael's arms. But none of it justified what I had done. I had destroyed the most beautiful, meaningful part of my life, and no amount of self-reflection could undo the devastation. Guilt became my shadow, a constant, gnawing presence that refused to release me. But the deepest pain wasn't the act of betrayal itself. It was the slow, crushing realization of just how deeply Ethan had loved me. He had been patient, kind, unwavering in his support. He had been my anchor, the one person I could trust with my heart, and I had cast him aside. Michael had never been more than an escape, a fleeting moment of distraction from a life I thought had grown dull. But in chasing that momentary relief, I had sacrificed the one thing that had ever truly mattered. When the wedding invitation arrived, I almost didn't open it. The name on the envelope made my chest tighten. Sarah. She had been one of Ethan's closest friends, and though she had always treated me with kindness, I knew she must have hated me now. Memories surfaced. Shared dinners, laughter, weekend trips, all now tainted by the knowledge of how things had ended. My fingers trembled as I finally peeled open the envelope. My breath hitched when I saw the location of the ceremony, the church where Ethan and I had once exchanged vows. I nearly tore the invitation in half, wanting nothing more than to pretend it didn't exist. But something in me, a longing for closure, a need to see him one last time, compelled me to go. The church looked almost untouched by time. The stained glass windows cast colorful patterns across the pews. The air carried the familiar scent of aged wood and roses. It felt like stepping into the past, a cruel echo of a moment when I had once stood at the altar, my hand in Ethan's, believing in forever. I slipped inside quietly, my eyes scanning the crowd, torn between the hope of seeing him and the fear of facing what I had lost. And then I saw him. Ethan sat near the front, his posture relaxed, a quiet confidence surrounding him. His dark suit fit him perfectly, the sharp lines only accentuating the changes time had brought. There were hints of gray in his hair now, but it only added to the maturity that radiated from him. He wasn't the same man I had left behind. He was stronger, wiser, someone who had endured heartbreak and emerged whole. But it wasn't just him that caught my eye. The woman beside him had bright red hair that framed her elegant features. She laughed at something he said, her hand lightly grazing his arm in a way that made my stomach clench. Was she the one who had replaced me? Did she love him in a way I never could? I forced my gaze away, swallowing the ache that rose in my chest. I had no right to jealousy, no right to regret. The ceremony began, and I focused on the words, on the love being celebrated before me, but my mind kept drifting back to the man I had lost. As the reception began, I lingered near the exit, debating whether to slip away unnoticed before my emotions became too overwhelming. But fate had other plans. His voice reached me just as I turned. Clara. I froze, my pulse hammering as I turned to face him. Up close, he was even more striking than I remembered. His presence was steady calm. So different from the man who had once stood before me, shattered and betrayed. I wasn't sure if coming was a good idea, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. His tone was polite, detached. Almost as if we were strangers instead of two people who had once shared a life. Are you okay? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. I'm trying. Therapy helps. His eyes held mine for a long moment before he said, I'm relieved. The words undid me. I'm so sorry, Ethan, I choked out. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I regret everything. I ruined the best thing I ever had. I was selfish and my voice faltered. I still loved you. For a fleeting second, something softened in his gaze. A glimpse of the man who had once been mine. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by quiet resolve. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, he admitted. His eyes drifted to the woman by the dance floor, her laughter carrying across the room. His voice was steady, unshaken. But I've made peace with what happened. I had to. It took time, a lot of time. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt like hell. But it's in the past now. I've moved on. The words settled deep in my chest, painful in their finality. I had spent years drowning in regret, but Ethan, he had survived. He had healed. He had built something new. I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara, he said gently. You deserve that. But it won't be with me. I nodded, my vision blurring with unshed tears. Because he was right. I had lost him. And no amount of regret could ever make it right.